Yeah, welcome back to another episode of the Format Podcast. Got a pretty interesting show for you here today. Going to take a quick break from the NBA to talk some NFL, and we're going to talk the best quarterback and arguably the best player in the league, and that's Patrick Mahomes. But before we get to that, if you haven't already, you know what time it is. If you're here on YouTube, go ahead, click that subscribe, that like, and that notification bell so you can be kept up to date whenever we drop new episodes and new content on the channel. If you want the audio only version of the podcast, open up your audio podcast platform, hit the search bar, type in the Format Podcast, give it a little search. We should come up. If you like the content, make sure you give us a thumbs up or a 5-star review, and don't forget to subscribe. Please share the content and the podcast with other people you know who want to hear a different voice on the sports talk and maybe different takes than they would normally hear from the mainstream sports media. If you do all that, you'll help us rise in the algorithm, help us find more sports fans, help more sports fans find us. Now let's get right to it. So Pat Mahomes, best quarterback in the league, pretty much inarguable, and arguably the best player all around in the NFL. And this is a summer where we've seen some pretty interesting things in the offseason, especially in terms of quarterback contracts. Now, we know that Mahomes won another Super Bowl, his second one last year, and his second league MVP. So he's out here and he's doing his thing, and he's winning. And I want to say 3 years ago, he signed a deal which was, technically the largest deal in the history of the sport for almost $500 million. But the thing is, we know that when it comes to football, a lot of that money is made up, and the only money you can truly count is fully guaranteed, which is the money due in escrow at the time of signing. That's the money that you really count when you talk about guys doing contracts, right? And teams have a lot of creative ways to go about saying, well, we're giving him this amount of money in the contract, but a lot of times, because NFL contracts aren't fully guaranteed due to the violent nature of the game and players getting injured and so on and so forth. And also, the way that teams often cut players when they're no longer producing to the same level. A lot of times players don't see all of that money. It's just the nature of the game and the nature of the business. And so when Pat Mahomes signed that massive deal, I think it's like $470 million, most people were making a huge deal out of it. But the fact is, it was a very team-friendly deal. It was spread out over, I think, 10 years. And realistically, Mahomes is, he's going to see a lot of that money, but it's not nearly what guys who are not quite as good as him are going to see in their deals. And so, a lot of times people talk about it and they think about the fact that he's in a position now where he can pretty much go to the organization and say, hey, I want a new deal. And pretty much if he was that type of guy and that's what he demanded, he would get it, because he's absolutely worth that. There's no replacing a Patrick Mahomes type player. I mean, they don't grow on trees, right? Pat Mahomes is absolutely elite mobility, elite understanding. Obviously, he's coached by one of the best offensive minds in the history of football, Andy Reid, so that helps a whole lot. But he's got all the tools. He's got elite arm talent. He can throw on the move. He can throw from the pocket, and he can just do it all. And we've seen it throughout his career, the miraculous things that he's done. We already know he's a guaranteed first ballot Hall of Famer, and he hasn't even been in the league that long. I think he's been a starter for 5 years, but he's in position already to do things that are very special. Now, with that said, much like I always talk about with basketball, and this is no slight on Mahomes and not taking anything away from him, but the rules you can't look at the stats in a vacuum, because the rules cater to quarterbacks now. You can't hit them. You can barely hit receivers going across the middle. Everything is geared towards the offense. So the rules and the way the game is played now is just completely, totally different, right? That's why when we look at a guy like Dan Marino having 48 touchdown passes in 1984, that's why that was so inconceivable, so incredibly ahead of his time. And, you always say, man, if a guy like Jim Kelly or John Elway or Warren Moon or Dan Marino or even Joe Montana or Steve Young had the opportunity to play today, who knows where the numbers would be, right? But it is what it is. You played when you played, you did what you could. What you have is what you have, and you got to be satisfied with your career, especially if it was an all-time great one. But, a guy like Dan Marino today would be absolutely insane. But, yeah, so Mahomes, he had some pretty interesting commentary the other day. So let's go ahead, listen to that, and then we'll get back and we'll talk about it.
It's been about 3 years since you got your deal, and I see chatter everywhere. Patrick Mahomes underpaid, all this stuff, some new deals are going out. Everyone's got an opinion about it, but we don't get a chance to ask you about it very often. How do you feel now, 3 years out from your deal? What do you want to see happen with with your contract? Does it need to be renegotiated? Are you fine with how it works?
Yeah, I mean, I always keep, me, my agent, and the team always keep open communication. And we try to do whatever is the best for the team, but obviously I want to do the best for myself as well. But at the same time, I've always said I worry about legacy and winning rings more than making money at this moment. But I know we keep communication. We see what's going on around the league. But at the same time, I'll never do anything that's going to hurt us from keeping the great players around me. So it's kind of teetering around that line.
So you're not driven to be the highest paid quarterback average per year. That's not.
No. It's more of a, you just want to do whatever to not hurt other quarterbacks whenever their contracts come up. You want to kind of keep the bar pushing. And so it's not about being the highest paid guy. It's not about making a ton of money. I've made enough money where I'll be set for the rest of my life. But at the same time, you got to find that line where you're making a good amount of money, but you're still keeping a lot of great players around you so you can win these Super Bowls and you're able to compete in these games.
Is that a hard line to walk?
Yeah, it is. I think it is for all these guys. And I think you see the guys that are getting paid this last offseason, they're trying to find that right spot. Everybody wants to get paid a lot of money, and whenever they think they're the best at their craft, they want to get paid like that. But at the same time, if you look at the greats in the league, I mean, they find that right spot where they're getting paid a lot of money, but at the same time keeping a lot of these great players around me. And so I understand, you look at the team, and you got guys like Chris and Snead and even Travis, all these guys that you need to keep around you to have these great teams. But at the same time, you want to make sure you're taking care of yourself. So we have open communication. I think that's the biggest thing, and you see that from Clark, you see that from Coach Reed, you see that from Veach and everybody. Is we just try to make sure that we have the best team on that football field and everybody gets what they deserve.
So those were some pretty interesting thoughts from Mahomes, and they really stood out to me because, when I talk sports with my friends and guys that I grew up with watching sports and guys that are in the business world, etc. And one of the things I always find interesting is this seeming need in the NFL that every time somebody's up for a contract, they have to get more than the last guy just because they're up for it, right? And I'm not the guy who necessarily agrees with that. For instance, you might be a guy who clearly is not as good as the guy who came before, but because you're up next, you get more. That's not really how life works. That almost seems like a participation trophy to me. If you're better or you're worthy of that money, yeah, fine, go ahead, pay him. But just because you're up next doesn't necessarily mean that you should have to reset the market. And I'm not really a proponent of that. And nor am I a proponent of taking every single penny just because you can. And so I often get accused of being the guy who wants to put money back into the owner's pockets. And I don't really see it like that. I guess, when you look at it, that is where the money ends up going, is back into the owner's pocket, because they are going to make the money off of it if you don't take it. But at the same time, I'm a guy who doesn't necessarily subscribe to taking everything. And I'm not going to say it's greedy, but at what point do you have enough? Like you heard Mahomes in his commentary just now say that he's got enough money to be set for the rest of his life. And clearly, his kids are going to have enough to be set for the rest of their lives. Like, how much is enough, right? And this is such a tricky spot because again, at the end of the day, if you don't take the money is going to go back into the owner's pockets. So, but for me, I don't look at it as cutting the owner a deal or giving the owner a break. It's just like, I'm not that guy that, if someone's offering me, let's say 150 mil, right? And I'm going to see most at 150 mil. Just because I'm up next and the guy before me got 155 or 160, especially if I'm not as good as him and I know to myself I'm not as good as him, like, I don't need to be fighting to get, 170 just to move the bar up. Like, I don't believe in that. And I also believe in getting what you earn, right? So you look at a guy like Mahomes, and I love his attitude, saying that while he understands that he doesn't want to do anything to hurt the other guys that are coming up behind him, at the same time, for him, he's good. He doesn't, and obviously everyone wants to be compensated. He said something along those lines too, but he doesn't necessarily need to be pushing to get every single penny. He wants to keep, he wants to do everything he can to field an elite team that can go and compete for Super Bowls, and while he can get compensated himself. Now, point of order on that. I have heard former GMs and capology people, former front office people from the NFL, I've heard them talk in the sports media openly and say it's a fallacy that, you should take less to help keep a good team around you. Because really, all it takes is a creative GM and creative capologist to position the money in the right way throughout the contract, whether you put a bulk of it in signing bonus or what have you, however you lay it out, you front load it, you back load it, whatever works best for your particular organization and their cap situation, right? So you don't necessarily have to be taking less to keep good players around you. So that's a fallacy that a lot of times players get fed in order for the owners to take advantage of the situation. And I don't agree with that. I think, like Mahomes said, there just has to be a balance somewhere in there between getting your relative worth, right, being compensated fairly, but also, not having to take every single penny and trying to be as competitive as you can and, just do your thing. But what I want to know from you is, what do you think of Patrick Mahomes' comments? Do you think he's right in saying that he's pretty much set for life? He doesn't have to take every single penny. Do you think that leaving any money on the table is bad for the players coming behind you, or that leaving any money on the table is just putting it back into the owner's pockets? Definitely want to know your thoughts on this. Go ahead, leave your comments in the comments section. I'll be back next episode. Can't wait to hear them. And I'm out. Peace.